All right, hello everyone, and welcome to our final round of our Worlds Collide tournament. This time we've got Death Tactics, Heisenberg, Pops Your Socks, and Steph, because these players are the top players from our previous rounds. So the best of the best competing in this final round. We'll have to see who can manage to come out on top. Each of them, I believe, has won multiple matches leading up to this, so that's been very, very well done on their part. All that said, we've got an interesting combo section right in the middle of this map, which probably looking pretty tempting to people. And in fact, Pops Your Socks is going to be the one to pull the trigger. 30,000 debt over to him for that. We do have this other area with a lot of aluminum and iron right in it, but you can see exactly how many resources that were so valuable got acquired by Pops Your Socks there, right? The valuable iron was super, super expensive, up at $40. Steel down at 60. Pops Your Socks drops expansive right in the middle of all that, and almost immediately gets up to HQ2. That's absolutely a massive deal for an expansive in particular, and especially with this cheap glass, that'll make it all more simple to push to HQ3, to push to HQ4. Pops Your Socks, I think, despite the large amount of debt that he acquired at the start of the game, has set himself up to be in a pretty good position because he'll be able to use those HQ upgrades to kind of outpace his debt, his mounting just poor bond rating that he would be continuing to acquire just based on the large amount of debt that he took on initially. Steph is going to be the one to found robotic in our aluminum iron patch. It's going to be a nice pickup for him. I don't believe, no, he wasn't the last to found, but he was third. So our two robots were the third and fourth to found. They're going to be the ones with the claim advantages. But of course, our expansive players have their built-in claim advantage anyway, so I doubt they're too concerned about it. Now, what Heisenberg did was look and say, water looks valuable this game. I am going to take the water. So, Pops Your Socks, early start, but he goes expansive. This will give him a lot of claims, but now he has to be concerned about life support. Heisenberg, seeing the water situation being limited, still goes expansive because he knows he'll be able to get control of that water and get control of that life support, but has to do it fairly early on and has to found in the midst of all that water to make sure he's going to be okay. This leads to Steph and Death Tacticus both founding as robotic. They don't want to have to fight over the water. They want to be able to kind of keep up in upgrades pretty effectively. They're going to get that extra claim anyway. And on top of that, Scavenger wasn't really looking like a great possibility anywhere. There's this patch of carbon down here, but it's not really near any other relevant resources. So robotic it was for those two. And they still get, you know, there's a little bit of water over here for Death Tacticus, a little bit of water for Pops Your Socks here. But still, I think nice decisions all around from all of our players. I am a little concerned for Pops Your Socks and how little water he's going to have. He's going to have to be looking at potentially slant drilling this game in order to secure plenty of water for himself. If he can get to it, he'll be all right. But as you can see, he's kind of floundering a little bit at the moment, needing to get into power to avoid too much debt. He's going to have to find some way to make enough money to go ahead and move on to HQ4. And unfortunately for him, almost no matter what it does, it'll open up some form of vulnerability, or it just won't be very effective. There's no great way for him to actually make money at this stage of the game. Almost let that go for 4,000. That would have been awkward. I feel like it's our robots who are going to be valuing this the most, as they are the two who are lagging behind in claims. Did this actually? Okay, Steph did take away these two water pumps here. That makes things more awkward for Heisenberg, but I think he'll still be all right. He still should have plenty of water available. Ooh, Pops Your Socks. I don't know if you want that for 20. That would be a little bit scary. A lot of debt over to him at that point. 24 for Death Tacticus. He'll be able to take that on just fine as a robot. He was only about 20,000 in debt anyway. It basically doubled his debt in order to get that extra claim. That's going to be just fine for him. And with that, he secures a nice carbon quarry. I like this decision. It allows a simpler transition into something like chemicals. They'll be pretty valuable for him. Nice, easy thing for him to do when he upgrades once more. Definitely something to consider. Of course, Pops Your Socks, unsurprisingly, moving into chemicals now. That Marsquake is going to make everything weird. Oh man, who gets the advantage out of that? Looks like it's actually potentially Death Tacticus who gets the biggest boost from there. as he was the one that was holding on to the most resources at the time. Heisenberg not going to be happy about that at all, I would assume, just due to the fact that it pushed that glass price up further, made it even harder for him to get to the next HQ level. He really needs to succeed at getting to level 3. Once he's level 3, he's pretty much golden, right? He's got control of the water. He's going to be okay moving forward, but he couldn't do it before nighttime hit. And so because of that, he's no longer making money off of his power. He's instead gaining debt. He'll have to pay through all of that too in order to be in a good spot. And you can see that he's just struggling because he couldn't do it before nighttime. Now he pretty much is being forced to wait until day to actually get that upgrade, and it's just going to take longer and longer and longer. He falls further and further behind. Pops Your Socks on these chems. These should be enough to move Pops Your Socks to HQ4. From there, he may be able to transition into a patent lab and have himself secured for the rest of the game. That's kind of almost the ideal situation for him, getting to 4 quickly from this point. Nobody else is making chems, which is great for him, especially because Steph is making fuel on these reactors. It's really helping it out. There's no pressure on these chems holding that price up, but it got high enough that that was okay. Like, they started high. Fuel was being kept low by how everybody was playing the game, by the fact that there were 2 robots. Death Tacticus very kindly decided to just damage that carbon price. Pops Your Socks got some carbon acquired himself, helping out with everything. That lets him push to 4 first, and that's a really big deal. That means Pops Your Socks is actually in a really strong position at this point. Now, being frozen right after upgrading, that's going to hurt. You can see he's struggling to actually add buildings at this point because of that freeze. And so Death Tacticus kind of technically ahead in this upgrade, but being an expansive at HQ4, better than being a robot at HQ4. The only downside is that life support and the extra tiles that you're getting the whole time definitely go a long way to making up for that. Dust Storm on the way. That's really not going to hurt any players too badly, except for possibly Heisenberg, who might have been wanting to get into food. Yeah, he is actually still moving into these farms. Yeah, he sees the dust storm coming, so he wanted to go into reactors, and he was like, but I don't want to put down reactors, because I could put down farms. Then he sees the dust storm and is like, but I can't put down farms. I have to go into these reactors. And so that is what we're going to see out of Heisenberg. That is not pleasant for him, and that's really unfortunate because Heisenberg was already kind of in the weakest position. Steph, on the other hand, he's really going to be taking some hurt from this because of this dust storm coming in. He's just transitioned his reactors into farms. But then, of course, they're going to become not very valuable farms very quickly, and that's going to hurt. So now he's having to move into extra reactors off to the side. Everything's just getting a little bit awkward for Steph over here. Not really what you're looking for. DT also moving into farms. Nobody really respecting that dust storm, except for Heisenberg. And so, incomes are pretty similar regardless, but the reactors definitely are just a little bit stronger. And on top of that, because he stayed in them, he's not competing in this random farm market. And Pops Your Socks also correctly identifying that maybe reactors are the way to go for the time being. And it should be pointed out that, like, we should be comparing these farms that are making 63 to these reactors at 86 due to adjacency bonuses. So reactors, definitely a strong decision out of Heisenberg there. Could help push him into a much better position against these players that moved into this farm transition. All that said, Pops Your Socks still doing just fine off in his corner. Water has never become extremely expensive this game because the robots move to secure so much of it so quickly. That's managed to keep water's price down. The robots aren't consuming massive amounts of water in life support or anything like that. They aren't driving those life support prices up further, leading to more life support production, which leads to an increased water price. Basically, because of that, it's made Heisenberg's water less valuable and has helped Pops Your Socks stay in a significantly stronger position. You can see he's just about in a spot where he can push to HQ5. He's got to be a little nervous about it because everybody is sitting on a little bit of cash. He needs to be careful about the upgrade in case they just kill him. But overall, Pops Your Socks, I would say, still in a very strong position this game. Steph doing well. He is HQ5, but once again, Steph is a robot. He needs to stay ahead in upgrades. Not only does he need to stay ahead, he wants to stay way ahead. It's a big problem for a robot if they are not staying way ahead in the upgrades in these games. All right, 24 on over to DT once again. He's put $48,000 of debt on into claims at this point. Not something I can really argue with. Not sure how bribes have panned out thus far. We can go ahead and check for once. 4 on over to DT. So DT, with his 4 bribes and 2 extra claims, is actually doing quite well in claims. That's 6 extras for him so far. And then a 7th. So DT actually should have the most claims this game. Interestingly enough, that is going to be something to watch out for, and see if these players kind of identify that that's what's happened, you know, once DT hits 5. So DT in a much better position than he looks, because once he hits 5, he'll be ahead in claims over everybody else, unless there was another recent claim purchase that went down by one of these players. I'm not sure exactly how that's panned out, but regardless, he'll either be ahead or tied with Pops Your Socks, I do believe. With those extra auctions, with everything else, I could have missed another claim auction at some point, I suppose, but regardless, all that said, he's in a great spot. Steph with the upgrade advantage, the HQ advantage, but DT, I think he's actually in a surprisingly powerful position. He's already got 2 patents, thinking machines and slant drilling. The patent lab is defended by a goon squad. That's fantastic. There are other patent labs down at this point, but the other 2 players are fighting over carbon scrubbing, while DT is headed to virtual reality. Virtual reality, not going to be super incredible this game. There's no real great adjacency for it anywhere. The best he can really do is 2 at the moment and hope that it grows into it. There's already another Pleasure Dome down. It's not fantastic, but it will be okay. The other detail being that, yeah, there are 2 expansives, but there are 2 robots. And while expansives are pushing that Pleasure Dome price up, robots do absolutely nothing to help it whatsoever. All these different things to consider. But I'd say Death Tacticus is actually who I'm looking at to potentially take this one, based on how things have shaken out so far. That said, Pops Your Socks and Steph still have a large amount of cash on hand, and they have managed to push into some optimization centers. Pops Your Socks has already picked up chemicals, glass, and water from his optimization. Steph, on the other hand, has taken oxygen, food, and is moving into chems and power next. Oh, superconductor auction is a little interesting. I don't think we have any actual power production adjacent to headquarters right now. So this is more of a... This is really weird, actually. Because there were so many geotherms on this map that everybody's taken a fairly large number of them at this point, I think. Except for potentially Heisenberg, who is in no power at this point. If anybody was going to take that patent, I would have expected it to be Heisenberg, but Steph is the one who picks it up. Yeah, this geotherm isn't even Steph's, right? It's Death Tacticus's. He took that away early on to prevent any shenanigans like superconductor. Death Tacticus also has an absolutely insane amount of power production. He's operating on 3 geotherms and not very many freighters. So that's actually, that is pulling in a surprisingly large amount of cash for him. He has managed to pay through all of his debt. That's pretty fantastic. It just kind of, more and more things keep seeming to go in Death Tacticus's favor here. He's gotten out of the patent lab. He doesn't want anything that's left, apparently. Moving into upgrades himself is going to be nice to do. I think DT is in a really great spot, and I'm not sure everybody else has kind of identified that just yet. Pops Your Socks still has cash. Steph still has cash. That's their advantages at this point, right? And that can't be discounted, but I think at this stage of the game, everybody's relatively equal. Nobody's really wanting to move into the Offworld first with dynamite on the table, in particular. And so I think I would much rather have DT's current investments over Pops Your Socks and Steph's current cash. DT's going to have to be careful. He's kind of in this awkward position where he's going to be looking a little vulnerable right now, only having 3 of his stock out of the 5 secured. He's going to want to resolve that pretty soon before people very, very suddenly just decide to go after him and he can't respond fast enough. He can't just think fast enough to fix it. but he should have the floating funds through his resources and his upgrades that he could cancel things and acquire that stock if it became necessary. And now he's actually going to go ahead and secure it, and he's going to be setting himself up, I think, in an absolutely great position this game. Oh, DT's got his 2 pleasure domes now. And you can see they're not great pleasure domes, especially with the current power price, but they're okay. And on top of that, on-world prices aren't all that great. It's really electronics that's kind of pulling in money at the moment. Electronics, kind of some steel. And so I think this is still okay. It's just not fantastic, because it was a pretty heavy investment to get these going. But he was fortunate. He got a little extra adjacency going on up here. That's always nice. And I still think it was a decent decision. It's just maybe less powerful than it would have been in other games. Offworld Market comes up, and Offworld Market goes down. No big surprise there. That is the danger of moving into that building quickly. Everybody's going to be watching. Everybody's going to know. And on top of that, spies are on the table. So there is the potential, and DT actually knew that that Offworld Market was not defended, period. This also makes thinking machines kind of a big deal, because on-world isn't all that great. You've got like silicon, glass, electronics, and everything else is kind of starting to crash out. Steel should stay okay as the off-world transition goes forward, but it's only adequate for the time being. Off-worlds are really starting to more and more look necessary for all these players. And so having that thinking machines ready to go is going to be a really, really big deal moving forward. On top of that, DT still has these upgrade centers running, these optimization centers running. Heisenberg has optimization centers running as well, but they're very recent. They haven't gotten much done yet. And Pops Your Socks and Steph, they're still back on 1. So yeah, they've got them. They've already got some upgrades done, but they're not going to be moving through those upgrades anywhere near as fast as DT is. So Pops Your Socks, in an effort to try and find something to do, he's the one that, pulled the trigger on the off-world first, which means he's the one that started getting punished first. Now Steph has managed to move to an off-world. He does have that goon squatted. If it gets attacked very, very soon, then he might be in a little bit of trouble. But because it's not getting attacked for the time being, he's kind of okay. If it doesn't get attacked for the next 12 seconds, he guarantees at least 1 launch from that off-world. If he can get off, let's see, if he can get off 2 launches, then he should be in a position where he's at least made that investment's money back, and hopefully we'll be able to hold on kind of through any further dynamite that hits. But Pops Your Socks, he's basically just throwing his money into a pit and setting it on fire right now, trying to keep this off-world market up that everybody is looking at and everybody knows about because he pulled the trigger first, and he's the one that looks so dangerous. But he's continually having to repair this thing. He hasn't gotten a launch off yet. Things are just looking awkward and bad. Now it looks like we've got a little more attention turned towards Steph, Pops Your Socks in particular, keeping an eye on this off-world market here. He's going to want to get aggressive against that, but there aren't actually great black market tools for that this game. You've literally got dynamite and EMPs. That's it. You don't have any, like, circuit overload or network virus that you feel like you can kind of throw away as fodder because they're less powerful to break through the goon squad. So anytime you want to break a goon squad, you're just handing some kind of powerful black market effect on over to your opponent. So they're just going to be bouncing black market around for a while. You can see it's caught. Everybody's going to be developing some kind of small black market just in their pockets. And then it'll kind of be, if anybody managed to store up a goon squad or push to one, that'll likely come out on top in the short term, because that'll guarantee an extra half launch. It'll guarantee an extra dynamite that's going to be available to them long term, probably. Dynamite keeps getting more and more expensive. It allows them to bounce back. I'd say that 70k goon squad is absolutely 100% worth it at this stage of the game, because it is guaranteed to catch something valuable. And it is guaranteed to save that off-world for an extra 30 seconds. And you can't just look at it as saving that off-world for an extra 30 seconds, right? You look at it as taking money out of your opponent's pocket by intercepting their black market effect and forcing that off-world offline for 60 seconds that you blow up, because they'll have to repair it, and taking all the money out of their pocket for the repairs. Steel's expensive, glass is expensive, electronics are expensive. Meanwhile, the launch resources are pretty cheap. 122 for food is, you know, it's moderate, but not ridiculously expensive. Still very, very valuable are those launches. So I have to say, these goon squads, somebody should be making an effort to hoard these right now, to the best of their ability. All right, tile auction's going to go over to Heisenberg for 20,000. It looks like he started that himself. So he's been using, and people in general have been using auctions this game, it looks like, to try and get more and more tiles. Death Tacticus has used a couple. Heisenberg has now used one. Pops Your Socks has used a couple. This still leaves Death Tacticus with a fairly solid advantage when it comes to claims when all is said and done. He's bought 5, got 2 on an auction at least, auctioned 2 more over to himself. I mean, let's just look at this territory. This is a ridiculous amount of territory for a robot, especially once you add in, look at all this silicon over here. This is absolutely fantastic. Using slant drilling to use all these tiles, get all these tiles, that's great. Like, look at all this silicon, look at these geotherms, and then you have to also include these special buildings up in this corner. That's an insane number of tiles. Absolutely ridiculous. Well, somebody got a hold of the goon squads. I'm not sure where they are. Steph's got a decent number, but he spread them out early, so he doesn't actually get to use them all that well. Meanwhile, DT is ungooned. Pops Your Socks is ungooned. Steph is ungooned on one Offworld, but has pushed into a second that is gooned. It's unlikely anybody is going to get aggressive against that goon, just because they do have a free one to hit. So moving into 2 Offworlds kind of indicates to me you shouldn't actually buy a goon, because people are going to be focused on your one anyway. Staying on one Offworld is where I would like to see the goon squad purchased. But hey, if you're going to get hit anyway, may as well have the 2 up, right? So, DT, he's still, I think, in a great position. You can see that DT and Pops Your Socks have gotten aggressive against Steph. Steph looks dangerous. Steph's got 2 Offworlds, but he also looks far more assailable than DT does. Now, Steph's going to turn back into DT, but of course, DT is the likely one to finish the Steph buyout. So long term, I find it unlikely that that's going to be an issue for DT. He should just acquire that stock back when he finishes his purchase on Steph. And still, I have trouble seeing anything that goes against Death Tacticus this game, besides all the attention he should be getting from his massive, massive lead. He's got all this silicon floating in. Silicon creeped up while everybody was making glass and electronics. No big surprise there. Glass stayed valuable due to these warehouses. Power's been kind of weird because everybody took geotherms this game. A little bit harder to comment on at this point, but there has been enough of it to crash out power and kind of keep it that way for a while. But Death Tacticus, on the back of fully upgraded electronics and glass, has just made such an absolutely insane amount of money, and he can actually stay in this glass because he's converting one silicon into 1.75 glass because it's so ridiculously well upgraded. And everybody else is going to be having more trouble doing that. You can see their upgrades aren't as powerful, they haven't had as many buildings down, they haven't been able to have as many buildings down because Death Tacticus has had such a ridiculous tile advantage almost the entire time. Death Tacticus is now threatening the buy on Steph. He'll probably get it done whenever he's got all of his investments sorted. He's going to have to repair this Offworld. That's going to slow him down just a bit as he gets that started. He's going to want to keep his launches going. There he goes, though. He finally manages to scrape the money together, finishes off Steph. 2 more claims over to Death Tacticus, and he does get to buy his little bit of stock back. So that is nice to see. So Death Tacticus still in a very, very strong position. It's going to be up to Heisenberg and Pops Your Socks to bring him down. Pops Your Socks has that one little stock in Steph, but still the big advantage going over to DT. And that's worth 21 apiece right now. And that's just going to keep going up on these double Offworlds, of course. Lots of farms down for Steph. We're going to be making okay money, not that big a deal, but it is the double Offworlds. They're going to be absolutely fantastic, driving up that money that Death Tacticus is going to be gaining. These players need to do something about this, and they absolutely need to do it now, which means it's going to be up to Heisenberg to somehow manage to scrape a lot of cash together after Pops Your Socks has finished purchasing what he can of Death Tacticus stock, which is exactly the sort of thing that we are going to expect to see from this high level of player. You can see Heisenberg is just holding his cash for now, and he's waiting. He's watching, and he's waiting to see exactly how things pan out. He knows he's probably going to have to take down Death Tacticus, and he knows it's going to cost an absolutely insane amount of cash, but there's nothing that he can do about that now. He's got to hope that the investments he's made up to this point are going to be enough to hold on and finish things out. The problem is, once again, all the edges that I see are in Death Tacticus' favor, right? He's got the stock advantage. He's got the stock price advantage. He's got the subsidiary pulling in cash. He's got a massive amount of silicon that has stayed insanely valuable this entire time, despite the fact that he's auto-selling it because of the sheer amount of glass production that's been on the board. And, of course, the electronics production that's also been around, keeping that silicon higher. Just definitely something to think about. Heisenberg, it looks like, has chosen to go with Death Tacticus instead of against, perhaps expecting that maybe he can push to Pops Your Socks before Death Tacticus can get it done. I don't see that working out well for him long term. I think if it turns into a Heisenberg and Death Tacticus race, Death Tacticus definitely finishes it up. But we'll just have to see what can be done from this point and moving forward. I don't really like this decision from Heisenberg, but I don't know if he really had a good one, because as you can see, it would take a million for Heisenberg to clean up Death Tacticus, whereas Death Tacticus, at this point, he only needs 540 to clean up Pops Your Socks. Death Tacticus has a very, very large amount of cash. I mean, Heisenberg has the option of potentially selling out of these stocks to slow down Pops Your Socks' death, let Pops Your Socks try and acquire his own stock back, is definitely an option here to try and see if you can hold on long enough to kill off Death Tacticus, but everything is going Death Tacticus' way from here. He's got the production, he's got the upgrades, he's got the subsidiary, which allows him to have 4 Offworlds. Heisenberg decides to clean up Pops Your Socks, trying to get his own subsidiary under his belt, but I can't see this working out. This does give Heisenberg a large amount of Death Tacticus stock. But Death Tacticus, he still has the stock price advantage, he still has the cash advantage, and he still has the subsidiary income advantage because he has had his subsidiary for so much longer. So I find it quite likely that Heisenberg is going to be falling out of this one, and Death Tacticus, we saw from all those little advantages he was building up quietly in the background when Pops Your Socks and Steph were sitting on cash, Death Tacticus was making investments, which is so much more important. And that's what you have to keep track of as you go into these games, is what investments have these players made. Not just who looks to be in the best spot, but who's actually doing really, really well. And Death Tacticus sneaking in so many claim purchases really worked out very well in his favor because it enabled him to do all this work with advanced buildings, and then when prices got high, Death Tacticus was set in a position that allowed him to take a nice, massive advantage off of them. Death Tacticus will need to push to about 700,000 to clean this up. Of course, he is already at 500,000 and continues to climb several $1,000s a second, with periodic launches gaining somewhere in the vicinity of 70 apiece. So it really should not be too much longer before Death Tacticus is able to clean this up. Especially if he goes ahead and cancels these launches, I'd imagine things will go pretty darn quickly. And we'll see him just go ahead and take this game. Very nicely done by Death Tacticus, really sneaking in there, getting things done when other players were floundering. They couldn't find anything to do with their money that was effective. They pushed to those Offworlds, they got targeted down, wasn't going to work out for them. Just huge. That was a really well put together win from Death Tacticus. Nobody can take that from him. That was really, really, really well done, especially against this proven caliber of player who have been winning so much today. So that's absolutely fantastic to see. Man, if you want to see how to win a game, please watch this one. That was really well done by Death Tacticus.